Esther. Hold on a second. Max was married to Essie, who was the sister of my grandmother, Bessie, who was my dad's mom. I am still a great friend of his granddaughter, Ginny Mahoney. Max Fleischer was born Mayer Fleischer on June the 19th, 1883, and was a Polish-American animator, inventor, film director, and producer. He was born in Krakow, Poland. Fleischer became a pioneer in the development of the animated cartoon and served as the head of the Fleischer Studios, which he co-founded with his younger brother, Dave. He brought such animated characters as Coco the Clown, Betty Boop, Popeye, and Superman to the movie screen, and was responsible for a number of technological innovations, including the rotoscope, the bouncing ball song films, and the stereoptical process. His son, it was director Richard Fleischer, who directed 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, amongst another 60 or so movies. He was born to a Jewish family in Krakow. At the time, Krakow was part of the Austrian-Hungarian province of Austrian Poland. Max was the second of 6 children of a tailor from Dębowa Tarnowski, Aaron Fleischer, who later changed his name to William, when he and his family emigrated to the United States in March of 1887. His mother was Malka Amelia Pelez. When the family immigrated to the United States, they settled in New York City, where Max attended public school. During his early formative years, he enjoyed a middle-class lifestyle, the result of his father's success as an exclusive tailor for high society clients. This changed drastically when his father lost his business in 1897. His teens were spent in Brownsville, a poor Jewish neighborhood in Brooklyn, where he continued his education in Evening High School. He received commercial art training at Cooper Union and formal art instruction at the Art Students League in New York. Studying under noted artist George Bridgman, he also attended the Mechanics and Tradesmen School in Midtown Manhattan. Fleischer began his career at the Brooklyn Daily Eagle, first as an errand boy, and was advanced to photographer, photo engraver, and later a staff cartoonist. At first, he drew single panel editorial cartoons, then graduated to the full strips. Little Angie and S.K. Sposure, the camera fiend, these satirical strips reflected his life in Brownsville and his fascination with technology and photography, respectively, both displaying his sense of irony and fatalism. It was during this period he met newspaper cartoonist and early animator John Randolph Bray, who would later give him his start in the animation field. On December the 25th, 1905, Fleischer married his childhood sweetheart, Ethel Goldstein. On the recommendation of Bray, Fleischer was hired as a technical illustrator for the Electro Light Engraving Company in Boston. In 1909, he moved to Syracuse, New York, working as a catalog illustrator for the Cross Hines Company, and a year later returned to New York as an art editor for Popular Science Monthly magazine under editor James McKean Cattrall and the Science American editor Waldemar Kemphoff. In 1914, the first commercially produced animated cartoons started to appear in the movie theaters. They tended to be stiff and jerky. Fleischer devised an improvement in animation through a combined projector and easel for tracing images from live action film. This device, known as the rotoscope, enabled Fleischer to produce the first realistic animation since the initial works of cartoonist Winsor McCrae, creator of Little Nemo. His patent was granted in 1917, but prior to that, Max and his brothers Joe and Dave made their first series of tests between 1914 and 1916. The Pathé Exchange was an independent American film production and distribution company from 1921 to 27. Offered Max the first opportunity as a producer due in part to the fact that Dave had been working there as a film cutter since 1914. Max chose a political satire of the hunting trip by Theodore Roosevelt. After several months of labor, the film was rejected, and Max was making the rounds again when he reunited with John Bray at Paramount. Bray had a distribution contract with Paramount at the time and hired Max as production supervisor for his studio. With the outbreak of World War I, Max was sent to Fort Sill, Oklahoma to produce the first Army training films on subjects that included contour map reading, operating of Stokes mortar, firing the Lewis machine gun, and submarine mine laying. Following the armistice, Fleischer returned to Bray and the production and theatrical and educational films. By the way, I was stationed at Fort Sill when I was in the service, believe it or not. That's just coincidental. The Inkwell Studios. Fleischer produced his Out of the Inkwell films featuring the clown character, which originated from his youngest brother, Dave, who had worked as a sideshow clown at Coney Island. It was one of the later tests made from footage of Dave as a clown that interested Bray. Fleischer's initial series was first produced at the Bray Studios and released as a monthly installment in the Bray Goldwyn Pictograph Screen Magazine from 1919 to 1921. In addition to producing Out of the Inkwell, while production manager for Bray, he supervised a number of educational and technical films, such as The Electric Bell, All Aboard for the Moon, and Hello Mars, the last two of which we'll watch later in the presentation. It was as production manager, Fleischer hired his first animator, Roland Crandall, who remained with him throughout the active years of Fleischer Studios. Out of the Inkwell featured a novelty of combining live action and animation and served as semi-documentaries with the appearance of Max Fleischer as the artist, who dipped his pen in the ink bottle to produce the clown figure on his drawing board. Some of you have seen that, I'm sure, when you were younger. While the technique of combining animation with live action was already established by others at the Bray Studio, it was Fleischer's clever use of it combined with Fleischer's realistic animation that made his series unique. In 1921, Max and Dave established the Out of the Inkwell Films Incorporated and continued production of Out of the Inkwell through various distributors. The clown had no name until 1924, when Dick Humer joined the company after animating early Mutt and Jeff cartoons. He redesigned the clown and named him Coco. Humer additionally created Coco's canine companion known as Fritz, and moved the Fleischers away from their dependency on the rotoscope for fluid animation, leaving it for special uses and reference points where compositing was involved. Because Max valued Humer's work, he instructed Humer to make just the key poses and employ an assistant fill in the remaining drawings. Max assigned Art Davis as Humer's assistant, and this was the beginning of the animation position of in-betweener, which was essentially another Fleischer invention that resulted in efficient production and was adopted by the entire industry by the 1930s. It was during this time that Max developed the rotograph, a means of photographing live action film footage with animation cells for a composited image. This improvement over the method used by Bray, where a series of 8x10 stills were made from motion picture film and used as backgrounds behind animation cells. The rotograph technique went into more general use as aerial image photography and was a staple of animation and optical effects companies for making titles in various forms of matte composites. In addition to the theatrical comedy films, Fleischer produced technical and educational films, including The Little Big Fellow, and Now We're Talking for AT&T. In 1923, he made two 20-minute features explaining Albert Einstein's theory of relativity and Charles Darwin's evolution using animatic special effects and live action. And there's a little bit of those people that we talked about a moment ago. And now I'm going to just quickly show you a little bit about Coco the Clown and a thing called earth controls. So that kind of gives you an idea of how creative he was. Most of the rest of them won't be as long, but let's move along. 1924, Fleischer partnered the Edwin Miles Fadiman, Hugo Reisenfeld, and Lee DeForest, the father of radio, to form the Real Red Seal Pictures Corporation, which owned 36 theaters in the East Coast and a couple in Cleveland. During this period, Fleischer invented the Follow the Bouncing Ball technique in his Coco song cartoons series and animated sing-along shorts. In these films, the lyric and song appeared on screen, and the theater patrons were encouraged to sing along with the characters as the animated ball bounces across the top of the lyrics to indicate when words should be sung. Song Cartoons 12 used the DeForest phonofilm sound on film process. My Old Kentucky Home in 1926 was the first using the system. This preceded Walt Disney's Steamboat Willie in 1928, which was erroneously cited for decades as the first cartoon to synchronize sound with animation. The song Cartoons series lasted until early 1927 and were interrupted by the bankruptcy of the Red Seal Company just 5 months before the start of the sound era. Alfred Weiss, owner of Artcraft Pictures, approached Fleischer with a contract to produce cartoons for Paramount. Due to legal complications of the bankruptcy, the Out of the Inkwell series was renamed the Inkwell Imps and ran from 1927 to 1929. This was the start of Fleischer's relationship with the huge Paramount organization, which lasted for the next 15 years. After a year, the Fleischer brothers started experiencing mismanagement under Weiss and left the company in late 1928. Inkwell Films Incorporated filed bankruptcy in January of 1929, and Fleischer formed Fleischer Studios Incorporated in March of 1929. Fleischer set up operations at Carpenter Goldman Laboratories in Queens with a small staff. After 8 months, his new company was solvent enough to move back to its former location at 1600 Broadway, where it remained until 1938. While with Carpenter Goldman, Fleischer started producing industrial films, including Finding His Voice in 1929, a demonstration film illustrating Western Electric's variable density sound recording and reproduction method. In spite of the conflicts with Weiss, Fleischer managed to negotiate a new contract with Paramount to produce revised versions of the song cartoons, renamed Screen Songs, produced the sound beginning with The Sidewalks of New York. During the sound era, Fleischer produced many technically advanced films that were the result of continued research and development of the perfected post-production method of sound recording. Several of these devices provided visual cues for the musical conductor to follow. As dialogue and songs became major elements, more precise analysis of soundtracks was possible through other inventions from Fleischer, such as the cue meter. Max Fleischer's most famous character, Betty Boop, was born out of the cameo caricature in the early talk-cartoon, Dizzy Dishes, in 1930. Fashioned after modern singer Helen Kane, she originated as a hybrid poodle, or a canine figure, and was such a sensation in the New York preview that Paramount encouraged Fleischer to develop her into a continuing character. While she originated under veteran animator Myron Krim Netwick, she was transformed into a human female under Seymour Nightel and Bernie Wolfe and became Fleischer's biggest character. The Betty Boop series began in 1932 and became a big success for Fleischer. This same year, Helen Kane filed a lawsuit against Fleischer and Fleischer Studios, and Paramount claiming that the cartoons were deliberate caricature of her, created unfair competition, and had ruined her career. The suit went into trial in 1934. An early sound test film of an obscure black performer, baby Esther Jones, was shown as key evidence, disproving Kane's claim as originator of the singing style. Judge Edward J. McGoldrick ruled the plaintiff has failed to sustain either cause of action by proof or sufficient probative force. In his opinion, the baby technique of singing did not originate with Kane. Interesting story in itself. Fleischer's greatest business decision became with his licensing of the comic strip character Popeye the Sailor, who was introduced to the audiences in the Betty Boop cartoon short, Popeye the Sailor, in 1933. Popeye became a box office hit and was the most successful screen adaptation of a comic strip in cinema history. Much of his success was due to the perfect match of the Fleischer Studio style combined with its unique use of music. By the late 1930s, a survey indicated that Popeye had eclipsed Mickey Mouse in popularity, challenging Disney's presence in the market. Fleischer did not create Popeye. He was a comic strip thimble theater created by L.Z. Chrysler, E.C. Seeger in 1929. Actually, Seeger produced Olive Oil and her brother Castor Oil first in 1919, along with Wimpy. Fleischer licensed Popeye with King Features syndicates in 1933 and produced 108 animated cartoons over the next 10 years with Popeye and Olive. Fleischer also added the spinach feature and the song I'm Popeye the Sailor Man. In Paramount, during its zenith in the mid-1930s, Fleischer Studios were producing 4 series, Betty Boop, Popeye, Screen Songs, and Color Classics, resulting in 52 releases each year. From the very beginning, Fleischer's business relationship with Paramount was a joint financial and distribution agreement, making his studio a service company supplying product for the company's theaters. During the Great Depression, Paramount went through 4 bankruptcy reorganizations, which affected their operational expenses. As a founding member of the Society of Motion Picture Engineers, Fleischer was aware of the technical advances of the industry, particularly in the development of color cinematography. Due to Paramount's financial restructuring, he was able to acquire the 3-color Technicolor process from the start. This created an opportunity for Walt Disney, who was then a small fledgling producer, to acquire a 4-year exclusivity. With this, he created the new market for color cartoons, excuse me, beginning with The Flowers and Trees of 1932. 1934, Paramount approved color production for Fleischer, but he was left with the limited 2-color processes of Cinecolor, that's red and blue, and the 2-color Technicolor of red and green for the first year of his color classics. The first entry, Poor Cinderella in 1934, was made in the 2-emulsion or 2-color Cinemacolor process and starred Betty Boop in her only color appearances. By 1936, Disney's exclusivity expired, and Fleischer had the benefit of the 3-color Technicolor process, beginning with Play Safe. These color cartoons were also often augmented with Fleischer's patented 3-dimensional effects, promoted as a stereo-optical process, a precursor to Disney's multiplane animation. This technique used 3D model sets, replacing flat pane backgrounds, and the animation cells photographed in front. This technique was used to the greatest degree in 2 real Popeye features, Popeye the Sailor meets Sinbad the Sailor in 1936, and Popeye the Sailor meets Alibaba's 40 Thieves in 1937. These double-length cartoons demonstrated Fleischer's interest in animated feature films. While Fleischer petitioned for this for 3 years, it was not until New York opening of Radio City of Disney's Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs that Paramount executives realized the value of animated films and ordered one for a Christmas release. The popularity of Popeye cartoons created demand for more. To meet Paramount's demands, the studio was challenged with rapid expansion, production speed-ups, and crowded working conditions. Finally, in May of 1937, Fleischer Studios was affected by a 5-month strike, resulting in a boycott that kept the studio's relief off theater screens until November. Max, having a paternal attitude toward his employees, took it personally as if he had been betrayed and developed an ulcer. Following this strike, Max and Dave Fleischer decided to move the studio for more space to escape further labor agitation. In March of 1938, Paramount approved Max's proposal to produce a feature just when he was preparing to move the studio from New York to Miami. Once in Miami, relations between Max and Dave began deteriorating, starting with the pressures to deliver their first feature, complicated further by Dave's adulterous affair with his secretary, Mae Schwartz. Everything is relative, I guess. Let me tell you about those relatives. Jonathan Swift's classic Gulliver's Travels was a favorite of Max's and pressed into production. Fleischer and Paramount originally budgeted the film at $500,000, the same miscalculation made by Disney with Snow White. The final cost for Gulliver's Travels was 3 times, or $1.5 million. It played limited engagements in only 30 theaters during the Christmas season of 1939 and made $3 million, giving Paramount a profit of $1.5 million before going into foreign release. But Fleischer Studios was penalized $350,000 for going over budget, and the contract did not allow Max and Fleischer Studios to station in foreign earnings. This was the beginning of the financial difficulties of Fleischer Studios and reduced royalties due to this debt to Paramount. In 1940, Max was relegated to business affairs and continued technical development. His efforts resulted in a reflex camera viewfinder and a line transfer method to replace the time-consuming, tedious process of cell inking. The same year, Fleischer and Paramount experienced lost revenues due to the failure of the new series Gabby, Animated Antics, and Stone Age, all launched under the leadership of Dave. After Republic Studios allegedly failed to develop Superman as a live action serial, Max acquired the license that fall and initiated development. Cost of the Superman series had been grossly overstated for decades, based on Dave Fleischer's 1968 interview later on. The actual figure stated in Fleischer's contract was in the $30,000 range, twice the cost of the Popeye cartoon. Superman was a reflection of the type of serious cartoons that were not being made by rival studios. This science fiction fantasy elements appealed to Max's interest, finally leading the studio into maturity and relevance in the 1940s. Superman could leap tall buildings in a single bounce was the concept developed by the creators Jerry Siegel and Schuster in 1938 for Action Comics. However, when Fleischer took over his studio, gave Superman the ability to fly, since leaping seemed hard to animate. The early turns on Gulliver prompted Paramount president Barney Balaban to order a second feature for this 1941 Christmas release. This second feature, Mr. Bugs Goes to Town, was unique, having a contemporary setting and was technically superior to Gulliver's Travels. Paramount had high hopes for its Christmas 1941 release, which was well received by critics during the December 5th preview. However, the exhibitors rejected it, fearing it would not do business, and with the bombing of Pearl Harbor 2 days after the preview, the original Christmas release was canceled. With the cancellation release of Mr. Bug Goes to Town, Max was called to a meeting with Balaban in New York, where he asked him for his resignation. Dave had resigned the month before, following the completion of the post-production on the film. Paramount finished out the remaining 5 months of the 1941 contract with the absence of both Max and Dave, and the change to Famous Studios became official May 27, 1942. Paramount installed under new management. Among them was Max's son-in-law, Seymour Nightel, who I knew very well, by the way. The early returns on Gulliver prompted Paramount's, I got that. Okay, that's a little bit about Seymour. Okay, moving on. Unable to form a studio for the demand for military training films, Fleischer was brought in as head of the animation department for the Industrial Film Company, the Jam Handy organization in Detroit, Michigan. While there, he supervised the technical and cartoon animation departments producing training films for the Army and Navy. Fleischer was also involved with type secret research and development for the war effort, including an aircraft bomber sighting system. In 1944, he published Noah's Shoes, a metaphoric account of the building and the loss of his studio, casting himself as Noah. Following the war, he supervised the production and animated adaptation of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer in 1948, sponsored by Montgomery Ward in 1948, an animated short film produced and directed by Max Fleischer, based on the 1939 Robert L. May poem, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, about a flying reindeer who helps Santa Claus. This 8-minute animated interpretation of the Christmas poem preceded George Gene Autry's 1949 song, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Fleischer left Handy in 1953 and returned to production as production manager for the Bray Studios in New York, where he developed an educational television pilot about unusual birds and animals entitled Imagine That. In 1954, Max's son, Richard Fleischer, was directing 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea for Walt Disney. This brought about the honorary luncheon that united Max and his former competitor and reunited them with a number of former Fleischer animators who were then employed by Disney. This meeting of the former rivals seemed cordial, and Max remarked that he was very happy making educational films at this point in his career. However, in his collection of memoirs entitled Just Tell Me When to Cry, Richard relates how, at the mere mention of Disney's name, Max would mutter, "That son of a bitch." By the way, there is an interesting side note with this story. Richard was knew of Max's disdain for Walt Disney, and what occurred was Walt Disney had offered Richard Fleischer the opportunity to do 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and he said to Disney in the meeting, he said, "Look, I better talk to my dad about this. You know your relationship." And Walt Disney said, "Absolutely." So he went home to meet with Max, and he said to his dad, he said, "Look, Max, Dad," he said, "Disney's asked me to do a movie for him. What do you think?" And he says, "You son of a bitch." He says, "Of course you work for Disney." He says, "He's the biggest guy around here. You should never pass up that gig." And that's exactly what happened from that standpoint. And Richard worked for him for a number of years. And in addition, Max and Walt became very dear friends to the end of their lives. Fleischer won his lawsuit against Paramount in 1955 over the removal of his name from credits of his films. While Fleischer had issued over the breach of contract, he had avoided suing for a decade to protect his son-in-law, Seymour Keitel, who was the lead director at Paramount's famous studios. But in 1958, Fleischer revived Out of the Inkwell Films Incorporated, partnered with his former animator, Hal Seeger, and produced 100-color Out of the Inkwell from 1960 to 61 cartoons for television. Actor Larry Storch performed the voices for Coco, and supporting characters Coco Nut and Mean Mo, while Max appeared in the unaired pilot. He became too ill to appear in the series, and while in poor health, spent the rest of his life regaining ownership of Betty Boop. Fleischer, along with his wife Ezzie, moved to the motion picture country house in 1967, and on September the 25th, 1972, Fleischer died from arteriosclerosis of the brain, and the press announced his passing, Dean of Animated Cartoons. His death preceded the reclaiming of his star character, Betty Boop, and a national retrospective. The Betty Boop scandals of 1974 started the Fleischer Renaissance with new 35mm prints of a selection of the best Fleischer cartoons made between 1928 and 1934. This was followed by the Popeye Follies. These special theatrical programs generated interest in Max Fleischer as an alternative to Walt Disney, spawning a new wave of film research devoted to an expanding interest in animation beyond trivial entertainment. Prior to the showing of several of the films, I will answer the question Uncle Max posed to me in 1957. The reason that it is colder at the top of a mountain than at its base is because although the sun radiates the earth, it does not warm the atmosphere. The radiation heats the earth into the far infrared, which in turn heats the atmosphere, making the earth the source of the heat for the atmosphere. Thus, the top of a mountain is farther from the heat source than its base. How's that? The first quick film we're going to do is he actually got to meet Albert Einstein during his life, and he said to Einstein, "Look," he said, "how about if I do a little animation about relativity?" Now, there's a long one, but this is just an excerpt I'm going to show right now that kind of uses his techniques to show that. So let's do that one first, and then we'll go on to other ones. The actual one that he did was about half an hour long. And if you ever want to get it, I do have a copy of it at some point in time if you want to see it. It's very, very creative, and he does cover relatively very nicely, and Einstein was happy with him. How's that? Okay. This one is called Trip to Mars, and I'm going to do most of this one, but I think you're going to get a kick out of this one too. Of course, that is Max right there. Oh, sorry about that. Just have to do this again. I'm sorry. Oh, there it goes. Hey, I was able. That's what I wanted to do, by the way. Okay. All right, and this one is called Bimbo to Mars, and I'm only going to do a brief part of this, but kind of gives you a little bit of an idea that his idea was that. And then the last one I'm going to do is Superman. See, his brother Dave is down there. I'm going to move forward a little bit. You could see that he just used the flight again into space. Okay. And then, of course, this is the premier thing that he did. And this is Superman.
Was there sound for this one or still no sound?
Sounds like supposed to be sound. It said musical arrangement.
Yeah, I was asking the same thing.
What was that? I couldn't hear it.
Was there sound for a particular
Yes.
one? Okay, yeah, we weren't hearing it through the stream.
Well,
I remember watching these shows.
This is the one thing that he did with the telescope, so I just want to.
Yeah, okay. Jack, I didn't know you were a star back then.
Yeah.
There's Jack right there.
Move it forward a little bit. Of course, you know who's coming to the rescue, right?
We hope.
My video has not changed at all in the last minute. Is your video changing?
Yeah, ours is, you might be hitting a network bandwidth issue out there, Jack. But we're having fun watching you in action. You should have told us you fought Superman back in the day.
Of course, Superman goes to the thing and comes to rescue it. And of course, using telescopes and all the other good stuff that you expect from Max Fleischer, that's what you get. So he saves the world, of course. And that's the story of Max Fleischer. And if you have any questions, you're certainly welcome to answer them. There are other movies. There are all kinds of other things. I actually have 6 or 7 movies in here, but of course that would be, you're not here to do that. Anyway, Max was an interesting character. He was very, very much with kids. So we related to each other for quite a while. And as a matter of fact, when I started my astronomy club in high school, he wanted to come and show one of his films, and I said no, that would be difficult, and we couldn't do it. So it was okay. And then I went off to the University of Arizona, communicated with him right through my graduation, and then he passed away a couple of years after that, 3 or 4 years. Any other questions?
Anybody go ahead and either, you want them to chat it in, Adrian?
Or we can just have them ask the questions.
Yeah, go ahead and unmute and ask the question.
Yeah, go
Go.
ahead and unmute if you have a question and just ask it. Let's see how that works.
Yep, War show.
Adrian, I have a comment.
Go ahead, John.
Okay, I watched Max Fleischer cartoons since I was a little kid. If you want to really entertain yourself, there's an outstanding cartoon that he did based on Coco the Clown and Betty Boop. It's St. James Infirmary, sung by Cab Calloway. It is really interesting. It has Art Deco influences, a lot of surrealism, and it's an outstanding both video and audio. And Cab Calloway was at his very height then. It's a really good version of St. James Infirmary. And the other thing is, my son, when he was just in grade school and junior high, became interested in old cartoons, comic books. And we got a hold of some of the very early Popeye comic strips that were done by Sagar.
Right.
And Popeye, the original character, was very different from what we see in some of the later work. Originally, he was the cartoons were very social oriented, and he pointed out that they were very ironic also. He was what we would call today a libertarian, and he pointed out in the comic strips, pointed out many of the ironies in our society in terms of authority and accepted standards and norms. It was really pretty interesting from a social and philosophical point of view. So those are two. The St. James Infirmary, if you can watch the 7-minute version on YouTube, it is really quite entertaining.
Interestingly enough, Popeye also had a pet that was his power source.
Yes, before spinach.
Right.
I see.
Yeah,
seen a couple of those really old ones and being confused. Because as I started, they would replay the shows and it would be spinach. It was always spinach, and then my parents tried to use that to get me to eat spinach.
Right.
See, I never had a problem with that. I always liked spinach.
But a spinach never came in until 1933. That was put together by Fleischer. But the pet was too difficult to do. Whatever, I don't know.
Yeah.
Same with his flying. So.
All right.
Questions?
Yep. I think Doug Warshow had a question.
Yeah, in the short you showed with Bimbo going to Mars, I noticed in the beginning he's fighting with a mouse. Was that a hit at Disney?
Let's see if it was Bimbo going to Mars. I think it's too early to have a fight with Gimbo. All right, I think that's before Disney came on the scene with Mickey Mouse.
Okay.
So no, probably not.
I was thinking the same thing, so you're not alone, Doug.
Yeah, when I first saw it, but then I saw the year of production, and it was prior to Mickey Mouse showing up. So Mickey Mouse, I think, came on the scene in 1929. So I think this was several years prior to that.
Well, one of the things that was prominently different from the early Fleischer work and Disney was Fleischer used imagery to invoke surrealism and to provoke really a wild imagination, whereas Disney was more of a storyteller.
That's true.
Fleischer was really more of an artist, was more of an imaginative, surrealistic artist.
He had about 20 patents, by the way, something that I don't know.
Well, any other questions?
Well, I want to thank you very much for having me today, and perhaps I can give you another one at some other point.
Oh,
Well,
absolutely.
we
Can't
appreciate
want
it.
much out of it. Oh, John, did you have one more thing?
Well, I just wanted to mention that Max Fleischer was a outstanding cartoonist and animator, interested in astronomy. H.A. Ray, who did the Curious George books, also is an avid astronomer and has written astronomy material. So art and astronomy are, imagination.
Hand in hand.
Yeah.
I used to have copies of Find the Constellations and Find the Stars by H.A. Ray.
Yes. Yeah, they're still published.
Yeah. I saw Jack just rejoined. My only other question is, Jack, how did it feel after Superman foiled all your plans? Inquiring minds want to know.
Wait a minute.
Well, Jack here and Superman's not, so that tells you everything.
Well, the problem is, I think I'm losing part of the texture bandwidth, but I never got to saw that part. I was stuck. And my car just shut off, so I ran back out and turned it back on, because that's what we're testing with that thing.
Yeah, for the most part, I think it works okay, but unfortunately, you may have missed the character that they drew for the evil astronomer using the telescope to pull in, to take over the world, basically. So I instantly thought of you and chimed in.
Okay.
So, Ken,
Since Fritz Wiki.
That's right. I gave a presentation very recently about Fritz Wiki and Walter Bad. It's a very good presentation. We should probably do it. It's a lot of fun. Two opposite characters you'll ever have known about. Fritz Wiki was, he had a statement that he was very antisocial guy. They called him a curmudgeon. The interesting thing that he said is he said that most scientists are, what did he call them? Spherical bastards. That's what he called them. He said, no matter which angle you look at them, they're still bastards. And Walter Bad was one of these very, very nice people. And of course, when Fritz he started getting more press than Fritz called him a Nazi. It was just, he was not a very nice man, Fritz Wiki. And he has had 3 daughters. They're all alive, and one of them is a complete off the wall individual. Very difficult individual. Much in the mold of her dad. Apple doesn't fall far from the tree, they say.
So, Ken, can you use another lowbrow T-shirt, perhaps a hat, a restaurant gift certificate?
Whatever you want to do. You don't give me a certificate. That's not it. A hat would be great. I'd like keep it in my cotton. Yeah, I'd love a hat.
We've got actually 2 types. I think I'll let Doug chime in if I'm wrong. There's one that's sort of a low profile, and it has a adjustable band in the back of it. And then the other type is a elastic, kind of one size fits all, and it's a higher profile, more like what you'd expect of a baseball cap.
Either one is fine with me, whatever you want. It's
Okay.
50,
I appreciate it.
style,
I have lots of hats.
39.30.
Somebody putting
All right.
one on?
If you could just, when you get a chance, email me your address, and I'll get that
I will.
on, and we'll ship that off to you.
That's great.
And once
Thanks
again,
very much.
appreciate it. And how about a nice round of applause for Ken?
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Go ahead and turn off your. I wonder if you go ahead and turn off your screen sharing.
Yeah. Done.
All right, we're back.
Okay. I will get us through officer reports pretty quick here, I hope. So if anybody wants to get outside, looks like it might be clear tonight. Kind of looking through my window.
Forecast says it'll clear up.
Yeah, it's kind of looking hazy now, but.
Yeah, I see
And cloudy.
clouds to the west from where I am.
So the only thing I have is that we are hopefully going to be sending an email out to the club membership that is going to be an announcement of a proposed bylaws amendment. Actually, there's going to be 2 or 3 amendments in there. One of them is Doug Scoble, our treasurer, discovered, I didn't know this was in there, that the treasurer is really supposed to do 2 annual reports a year, and he's always been doing 1, so he's fired. No, he doesn't get out of it that easy. But he proposed that that should only be 1. All the officers seem to think that's really all that's necessary. So we are going to offer that as an amendment to just make that 1. But the more significant one is we've decided to create another officer's position. This would probably be an optional position, such as the webmaster. In this case, it would be somebody responsible for handling what we're doing right now, our Zoom meetings, recording on YouTube, etc. We tossed around some different names like online coordinator. I forget. Actually, I think Krishna had one I really liked. But that's an amendment. We'd like to create that position, and we have just the man to fill in for that. And you might guess that would be Jeff Kopmanis. So that would be the next thing, is we would nominate him. Of course, anybody else can go for the position too. We thought this was a good thing to do because Jeff has been so key in being able to do what we're doing right now. So, and we really think this is looking down the road. This is sort of part of the new norm. So it really made sense to us that we have somebody that that can handle those kind of functions for us. And then the next amendment will be, and that one actually will have to come before the one I just mentioned, and that is we're going to offer something so that we're not locked into only being able to do officers' elections at a live April meeting. That's why we weren't able to do it, because we couldn't have the April meeting. We could perhaps be in a little bit of a vicious circle, because if we have to vote on a bylaws amendment at a live meeting, we can't adjust it. But you know what? If that's the case, we beg your forgiveness. So anyway, expect that to come up pretty soon, and we will be looking for a vote of approval on that in the July meeting if we pull this all together. So,
well, Charlie, the bylaws are pretty ambiguous and can be interpreted that we can make decisions at meetings and not,
yeah.
And when we wrote the bylaws, the only meetings we had were in person, but now we have online meetings.
Yeah, very true, Jim. And Adrian and Jim actually have been very good. They've proposed some language for the amendment. We're just sort of fine tuning that, but I appreciate the help on that, because I've had my hands more than full lately. So again, the help is really, really appreciated. That's all I really have. So I will move on to Jim.
Well, that's mostly what I was going to talk about, and I guess we've talked about it. I think the officers ought to set up one of these meetings so that we can finalize some language in the next few days so we'll have something by the beginning of the month, because bylaws amendments have to be published in the newsletter.
Question, does quorum also, will that work for a virtual meeting?
I'm sorry?
Well, with the term having a quorum, will that also work for a virtual meeting? Like
well, quorum is who shows up to the member meetings. Mm-hmm. So whatever the majority of the members that show up to the meeting decide, that's what the club does. As far as the officers go, that's been more informal. We've tried, before we make a decision like to, spend $150 on an eyepiece for the observatory, for example. We try and get most of the officers to chime in and take a majority of them. But that there's no formal language about how officers make decisions. And that's about the only one we can really make. Now, we've had the pandemic emergency, and we gave ourselves another year in office, I guess. But, we have gotten this process down to the point where we really ought to ask the membership if they want us to remain in office till April. Do they want to do something between now and then? You know, if somebody wants to be an officer, they ought to speak up, and that may be one way to handle it, because if no one wants to take one of these jobs, it's all kind of moot as long as the officers are filled. And since no one resigned, and as far as creating a job, part of the reason for the person that organizes these meetings, the technical side of it, much like Krishna does the website or Don does the newsletter, we really do need some, you know, editorial control by the membership. And since Jeff set this all up and he has the mainline connection to the university and the free Zoom that we use, that's pretty important to establish from the get-go that this is something that, you know, just like the McMath Observatory, that the Lowbrows have always done, so we'll do it forever. And having access to this university resource has been pretty important these last 3 months.
Yeah, keep in mind that Krishna may have done this, but he's in the fortunate or unfortunate position, however you look at it, he's also a doctor. This was a pandemic and his services were needed helping save lives and deal with COVID-19 as it began. And, you know, we even got our information from him. He didn't have time to come back and start organizing the online meetings. Jeff did have the time since he works for the university. Jim, you mentioned that.
You're right.
Played a very important part.
Well, he works in the department that organized Zoom for the entire university, all
right.
of inline classes. I mean, the connection between us right now is pretty tight with the university in this regard.
And that's a very good thing, because it's not costing us extra money to be able to use the bandwidth.
And we've also got the complete suite of whatever Zoom offers to make our meetings run smoothly.
And another good thing is just earlier today, Jeff sent us an email that he got from apparently his boss at the U of M, because he asked about his usage of Zoom for both GLAC and for the Lowbrows. And basically he got the green light. They look at us as, in a sense, scientific education. So they don't have any problem with our continued use through Jeff's account. So that was great news too.
Yeah, so I know we'll work out the details as we go along, but the bottom line is we're able to do these meetings. Jeff stepped up pretty quickly to set that up and has been very enthusiastic about being a member of the club. I've talked with him.
Most of us
had it on several occasions.
Were you done with your report, Jim?
Yep, I'm pretty well talked out.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Then how about Adrian?
Not much to add. We know GLAC is going online. I think Brian is going to send out email to the various clubs to discuss what sort of online content that we all might be putting out there. Now, because meetings are being recorded and talks are being recorded, we could simply use that as online content. I think Doug Box joined us. His prior, imaging runs might be good content. Anyone who has ideas for content that we can share on that day, that all of those ideas are good ideas at this point. We've got a couple of months before we launch it. And other than that, just continuing to do my own observations. We've had a huge string of good weather for a change, so hopefully everyone's getting out there and getting a look at the night sky. We're passing into midsummer, and you see the virtual screen behind me. Milky Way rises late, but it's going to be rising earlier and earlier. I'll announce for Ani, and Jim, you know, Ani will be representing us, giving a talk to an Ann Arbor Camera Club about astrophotography. So
That's something else I need to talk about. Yeah.
yeah, that will be coming up in September.
Yeah. The camera club is operating much as we are. They're having online meetings. They don't meet through the summer, but they will begin again in September. Another thing they want to do is have a session on Peach Mountain when we're more or less back to normal, with several of you who do astrophotography up there with your rigs, and answering questions, showing how you do it, that sort of thing. And so I'll be working on that once we can actually schedule something with people up there that aren't members. The other thing is, this club is older than the Lowbrow, so you know, things are going to have to be pretty well set with COVID being in the historical past before they're going to want to go up there anyway. So this is nothing that will happen soon.
Yep, I'm a recent joinee of the club, so we'll see how things go.
We have
My
been
passion for photography. Yep.
the Lowbrow Officer Corps hasn't been this young for a long time, with you and Joy and Jeff.
Yeah,
who hopefully will be an officer, and Krishna. I mean, most of the rest of us are past 60, so I feel really good that we're getting another generation going.
yeah, we kind of have to, because you know, that our general public, and I know I mentioned this in some emails, the general public, as they see states open, and some of this can go into minutes, are going to begin hitting us with, when can we come to Peach Mountain? When can we come to Peach Mountain? And it is our choice for our safety of members, and also the safety of those, whether or not they believe they'll catch COVID-19. It's our job to make that decision, and as we're deciding not to have these open houses, we just simply stick by that decision. And there may be, I haven't heard much else in terms of concern about it, but we simply tell them that this is what we're doing, and that's that. We're not in a rush to have anyone contract COVID-19, whether they die or not, and then come back on the club and tell us, you know, and then put ourselves in position for possible lawsuits if whomever it is.
We could get one of those forms from Mr. Trump that exempts us from responsibility.
Yeah. Well, see, that's the other thing. If it happened up at Peach Mountain, would they possibly go after the U of M too?
Well, I'm not so concerned about that. My concern is actually keeping people safe. You know, if we were doing solar observing up there during the day, we could figure it out. But at night, I don't see how we can keep people from doing whatever they want, actually.
Plus,
or just having accidents of being too close. You know, it's just.
I can agree with that.
Plus, as you said, it's U of M property. They decide when and where groups are allowed to be on their property, you know.
Yeah,
both
exactly,
things.
Doug.
That's
It
the
hasn't
that
been.
trumps all, and no pun intended, but that trumps all. You know,
Yeah.
our decision behind it, you know, just sort of reinforces it.
Yeah, I've
Yep.
wanted to organize member nights for a while, but I have yet to see anything on the university's website that beyond, you know, some of the research facilities opening up that it would apply to us doing the same. So I don't think we'll see that until the fall.
All right.
You know, but you know, Schlissel's an epidemiologist. He's not a, you know, he's a little more resistant to opening up than even the governor or some of the other college administrators in the college administrator universe might be.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about
And
Don
then-
Bowie? Oh, I'm
have
sorry,
anything-
Adrian. Go ahead.
I don't have anything further.
Okay.
I'd
Don?
move on.
I don't really have a report. I have materials for next month's newsletter. I'll wait to publish until I get any language for the modifications of the bylaws. I'll make sure that goes into the newsletter. I'm going to be out of town all next week, so I'm not going to be able to work on the newsletter until the first week of July anyway. So
Okay.
that's my report.
All right. How about Joy? And I neglected to ask somebody to do the minutes, but Joy looks like she's writing away there. So thanks for bailing me out. Anything to
Sure.
report, Joy?
No, thanks.
Okay. Appreciate it. And how about live from Peach Mountain Observatory, Jack Brisbane?
Well, thank you very much. Now, I'm assuming you can hear me okay.
Yes.
The reason for doing this is a couple weeks ago, I was asked to attend the IT meeting representing the observatory and discuss some issues with the people there. In the meantime, after that, I brought my vehicle up here to Peach Mountain today because I wanted to test the system out here using the Zoom meeting to get an understanding of bandwidth and the problems. And based on what I see tonight, I had a couple network bandwidth problems. You know, they have little sign flags across the screen. That came on a couple of times. And at one time, the whole screen kind of froze. It never moved. So it could be some other bandwidth things. I've done speed tests up here to get an idea. I do now, because I'm with, my car's a Chevrolet, it's through OnStar. When you pick up bandwidth for internet access, you go through AT&T. So I did go up to the cell tower lookup for Peach Mountain Pinckney area. There is an AT&T tower approximately 6 miles from me. And I went up and looked at the tower, came back here, and I did a speed test, but I think the speed test is being done independent of that tower. I'm not sure. It doesn't give me the same coordinates for that tower. It gives me coordinates for Kansas. So the IP address I chased back and forth, and that IP address does not come here from Pinckney or Dexter area. So there's something else going on. Now, the reason I'm doing this, to get an understanding of how well the internet works. Up here, we have another meeting on the 26th. This time, Jamie Cutler from College of Aerospace Engineering. And then I think John Keaty, or maybe his rep, I'm not sure if he's gonna do it or his rep, but they will be online from College of Engineering, and they're gonna give an understanding of the bandwidth, what they need, what types of internet access. The reason we are looking at some of the Wi-Fi and wavelength sending types is if you want to do if you would like to do a fiber cable all the way up here, it's about $1 million to $2 million to lay a fiber cable from Ann Arbor all the way up here. So we are looking at some of the towers, and there might be some other options. of some kind of receiver or signal receiving station, then amplifying that signal. Some other issues. But I wanted to test my Wi-Fi connection to see what kind of problems I get. I did some speed tests and some other things. So we'll work with those people. I'll see them. We will be doing a Zoom meeting this Friday. Other than that, you can see around here if you're looking. I don't know if you're seeing my picture on the screen or not, but
Seeing the
We see
McMahon.
ya.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
seeing.
okay, then you should see the whole picture then with the McMahon in the background and the telescope and that. Things look pretty good up here. The other issue on the COVID-19, the language I used in the cancellation notices came from the U of M, some of you know, and that the whole thing for spring and summer, except for the research issue, you know, as you may have known, has been canceled out. Those are the arguments of why we're really not having any meetings, any observing sessions here. I'm not sure if we'll get Angel Hall back in September. Maybe Shannon Murphy has a better understanding of that, how that's going to work out. Other than that, that's about all I have to say about the observatory. Things look okay here. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Jack. How
Yeah,
about Doug
Jack.
Scoble? Oh, go ahead.
Jack, I have a question, Jack. What about putting a satellite dish up there and, hooking into, something, one of the satellite companies for internet?
That's one of the issues we were discussing. That's why they're looking at bandwidth and what it would cost to have a satellite hook up and directly to that satellite company. A lot of issues right now. They talk about satellite, a lot of people do, but like around here, it's still cell towers. And there are a few people that I want to look into some satellites crossing and see if we could get into that and then maybe enhance the signal. We had some different ideas about doing that, but that's one of the issues for the rest of the meetings, to determine how much bandwidth we need. They want bandwidth for the security cameras, Zoom meetings, which the bandwidth I'm having right here, I would question. And there's some issues about classroom participation and students accessing it. And if they did reopen this up for some kind of STEM program or research or student training, then what kind of internet do they want? That's a question that's going to be answered out of College of Engineering and Jamie Cutler out of the Aerospace Engineering Group. It has to do really with that radio telescope. And there is a plan in place to repair the vandalism that happened up here with the fences and the buildings. They want some security cameras. There's an issue about fixing the roads. So I'm hoping all that will come up a little bit at the next meeting, so we get a better idea of the internet connection. And the other thing I'm not sure about is, the president put a hold on a lot of expenditures in that.
We he might be hit low.
Yeah, it appears we've lost audio anyway, Jack. I don't know if you can hear us.
I've lost both audio and video.
I see video, but it might be frozen. I can't tell. If you can hear us, can you wave at the camera, Jack? Oh, I bet that's a frozen picture.
Yeah, he's probably got a glitch will happen. You're using your cell phone.
Yeah.
There was about bandwidth speeds. I don't know. It can't be very much from that location. Definitely not quite enough to carry a sustained signal. Yeah, he's rejoining.
Yeah, now he's totally gone.
Yeah, that.
Then I guess in the meantime, we'll go ahead and move on to Doug Scoble.
So Doug has no mic. Doug, I'm going to read this for you. We have 159 memberships. We have, he also sent an email with this too. So
yeah, I just see he chatted this in. Very nice.
Yep. So we have $7,991.91 in the treasury. $127.50 of that be earmarked for the Astronomical League dues for members. He's filed our annual e-postcard, federal e-postcard for fiscal year of April 2019 through March 2020, which mainly states that we're still in business. And then B, our annual receipts are $50,000 or less. Speaking of the Astronomical League, many have paid up. Plus, we have a couple new joinees. I have to mail in the payment before the end of June. So if you have yet to pay, then get your $7.50 in to Doug Scoble soon. And if there are any questions about how to get your $7.50 to Doug Scoble, he's got a couple of ways to accept payment. PayPal is probably the quickest and preferred if you can do that. So you can send Doug an email if you are interested. And other than that, pretty sure I've covered it, Doug. If you're listening, I'm pretty sure I got your report covered.
Okay. Thank you, Doug. Thanks for reading that, Adrian. I don't see Dave Jorgensen or Krishna joining us, so that would be the officers' reports. Does anybody have anything else they wish to bring up?
I'm back online. I had my car running and it runs so long that it shuts off. So that's why it disappeared. But we're back up and running now.
Your hotspot. That makes sense.
Yep, the hotspot. Yep. One of the things with the cars you have to think about when you leave them just running.
Yeah.
Idle with nobody in the car. So anyway, let's continue. Thank you.
Yeah. Ken, go ahead and I'll let you make the announcement, and then Doug, and then Don will be next. Yeah. Ken, go ahead and make your announcement about there's a live stream Monday you told me about.
On the July the 6th, Dale Parton and Jim Sadlowski are going to be debating Bob Tremblay and me about whether we should send humans to Mars. And Bob and I are speaking against it, and Jim and Dale are speaking for it. There's a time frame of about 30 years that we're looking at, and both Bob and I are set against it for. Well, you can hear all the myriad of reasons. I probably have. It's an hour and a half debate, and I don't see any way it's going to take less than that. So if you want to come on, it's a webcast website. It's WebEx, and it's also YouTube, so you can watch it either way. And we can help you get on WebEx if need be. But if you're interested, I'll send to Adrian and to Charlie the site. We have a very interesting thing about our club. We are actually had David Levy attend a couple of meetings, and Fred Espenak is going to be joining us this next time. And there are people that are showing great interest in our discussions. But this debate is going to be great fun. So.
Just take it easy on Jim there, Ken, because he happens to be our speaker next month.
I will never take it easy on Jim, nor will he take it on me, so it's okay.
Don Foey.
Yep, Don.
Hi, I'd love to do some observing. Lake Hudson's a long drive. If anyone had any suggestions for somewhere, west of Ann Arbor to do some observing, I'm looking for a location.
Go up north.
That's even longer drive.
Yeah, I'm looking for, something less than an hour.
Okay. Well,
yeah. Jim.
Well, yeah. Is Jack still there? Yeah, Jack.
Yeah, I'm still here.
When you meet with those guys next Friday, can you ask them about us using the hill for the members?
I can, but it's going to be up to the U of M.
I understand.
Their decision, what their decision is. That's what this whole problem's been with them, because I know what people want to do. They want to avoid that issue and have members only meetings. I understand that.
Yeah.
I don't know what their number would be and how they, but yeah, we can start asking that question, and maybe there'll be some changes now that Governor Whitmer has relaxed the bars and restaurants and the DNR is opened up. So
Yeah, that's
I
sort of
see
what
your
I'm.
point. Yeah.
But you know, I wouldn't want to have us physically just closer to one another than maybe a couple of car lengths, and you know, and everybody would need to be armed with a mask, just like they would going out into the rest of the world, at least if they've got any sense. And that's one thing we can enforce among ourselves. You know, these are things that are a lot more difficult with the public, but with the members, that's a doable task. And that kind of distancing, there wouldn't be any more than 10 or 12 people up there anyway. There just isn't that much room.
You know, there's another thing that I noticed. Recently, there's been a sign up on the main gate when you walk into Peach Mountain off North Territorial.
Yeah, they're having
Social-
activities.
They have the social distancing sign and that. When I came up here today, that sign was gone.
It was, okay.
And I don't know if it's vandalism or some just, you know, expressing their opinion or if it was removed. So it was actually put out there by, I think, DPSS. So that's another issue. So maybe there are relaxing restrictions up there. I don't know.
That'd be a good question to ask them.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like they would have relaxed the social distancing part of it, though. Not yet.
No,
Well, if you go to bars and restaurants, I don't know how much social distancing there is.
Yeah.
I haven't been in one yet.
That's
I
a
did
good
go
point.
to a restaurant, but they had all their chairs, everything was moved and changed. So 6 feet from every table. So the guy went from 75 tables to 41. So he could do that. So that's just a short take. I'm sure other people have their own experiences of what's going on.
Yeah, 95% of the people in Washtenaw County who have died from this are over 60. And seeing as how I'm in that class, you know, we're gonna social distance quite a bit. I just, you know, I don't need to get sick, and neither does any of the rest of you.
Yep.
But I think we can make this work.
There's a very good point about that. And there's two research programs out, one out of the CDC and one out of some private hospitals dealing in biological and viral contaminations and things like that. And the argument is the person that's asymptomatic. He does not show symptoms, but he has COVID-19. And CDC says it's 16%, and the independent researchers say, nope, it's closer to 40%. So we want to argue with variation statistics, add them, divide by 2, play the game, and you get around 28% either way. I look at that as a problem.
It is a
because
problem.
that has been shown, and it's been verified by many, many, many other research and private companies that are in the genetics and biological major universities, from Johns Hopkins to God all over the country. It's coming up with the same problem.
Well,
So
all I can say is, you know, you can convey how serious we are about the virus and our plans to be able to use the Hill safely.
Yeah.
If they don't agree, well, then that's the way it is. But that's the plan. I'll
Okay.
get them to fix the darn road. I mean, Jesus.
Does anybody have anything else? Well, seeing or hearing nothing, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
One more thing.
Okay.
Are we going to write this, these bylaw amendments over email?
Yeah, unless you want to pull an officer Zoom meeting together and hash it out. The email seems to be working though.
Yeah, I think so. It's just that I haven't gotten many answers to the proposals I've made so far. So, you know, I understand people are busy and just doing regular life feels like you're walking through sand, but
Right.
but that it's only going to work if people actually reply to the ideas that are put out there.
Yeah, well, I'll definitely take another look myself. Make sure I've gotten through all the proposals and.
Yeah, I did see some replies. I think Don replied, Doug Scoville, Krishna.
And that
I saw
issue,
others. It looked like everybody was in favor of it.
yeah, no, that issue of must as opposed to, you know, setting goals for the online meetings, that needs to be written so that it'll be one or the other.
Yeah,
Uh,
worth.
my comment is, I really appreciate Jim's talent for putting words on page. And I look forward to maybe you drafting it again and us each giving a review of it.
Sure. I'll get to that in the next couple of days.
Sounds good.
All right. So
I'm going to be, I may not reply next week. I'm leaving Monday and I'm going to be gone for 7 days. But
where are you going that you can safely go?
well, we're going to go to a campground with our camper and try and social distance there. And my daughter's got 35 acres and we're going to go set up on her 35 acres.
Well, that'll work.
Yeah, that should do it.
Where's the 35 acres? We'll physical distance.
Wait a minute, how dark is it there?
Well, the problem is I'm going to take my telescope, even though we're going to have a moon, but from the videos I've seen, it's 35 wooded acres.
Oh.
Up north of Kalkaska.
Okay.
And they managed to clear a road and a loop in, and they built a fire pit and an outhouse, and they cleared a spot where we can park our trailer. So I got a little 14-foot pop-up camper. So they do have a section in the back, I understand, where they clear cut. And I don't know if I can get back there with my telescope or not, but
okay.
I'm going to evaluate the site to see whether it's appropriate for observing or not.
All right.
Cool.
Good thing.
Okay, I think we had a motion and support to adjourn. So unless anybody has anything of burning necessity, then I would say we'll call it an evening. So thanks, everybody.
Yep.
Yeah.
Take care, people of Earth.
Yep.
Yeah, Adrian, thanks for doing
Yep. And thanks again.
No problem. Jim left it up to me to host it, and yeah, I think it went smooth.
Yep. All right. Good night, everybody.
All right.
Good night. It's Abe here, and it's good seeing you guys.
Yeah. Good night, Abe.
Have a good night, guys. Yeah.
Good night.
So where all these clouds come from that are supposed to be clear tonight?